Okay, welcome to episode number 14 of the Smart Leader Sell podcast. I am Jessica Lorimer, sales coach and leadership expert, and I'm really jazzed about today's topic because honestly, it's one of those topics where I mentioned it off the cuff to my boyfriend as we were driving along today, and I was like, I think I'm going to record the podcast about this. And he was like, I'm not entirely sure if that's relevant to sales. And I was like, no, it is. It really is. And I was telling him all about why it was so relevant. And after 15 minutes of solid persuasion and a McDonald's thrown into the bargain, he was like, yeah, no, okay, you were right. I can kind of see it, which in his world actually means, oh my goodness, I am bowing down to your greatness. You've totally got this nailed. And everyone's going to be really excited to hear about it. So let's hope that it's the latter and that I don't really have to go around bribing all of you guys with McDonald's to help you see the wood through the trees on this episode, which is all about the hacker, the ancestral war dance of the Maori people, and how it's really important to sales and more importantly to your sales success. Okay, so let's just get involved here and figure out in the wonderful world of Jess, which honestly is quite a nice place over here. Things are rosy, rainbows are groovy, like chihuahuas are rolling around in the breeze. It's a pretty nice place to be and fairly eccentric. So I want to just walk you through where this idea has come from. Because even though I don't think it's just me who doesn't really watch rugby, I mean, I'm not a massive rugby fan, but there is just something about the New Zealand All Blacks team that if rugby is on, it's them I want to be watching. And actually, I would be bold. Okay, I'm going to throw this mega claim out there. The New Zealand All Blacks are my number one favorite sports team. Okay, now I don't watch a lot of sports, so potentially if you are a member of the New Zealand All Blacks team, you don't necessarily value the fact that you are one of my favorite sports teams, if not my favorite sports team in the whole world, because I don't really watch a lot of sport. However, the reason that they are my favorite sports team in the world, there are a few things, right? They have incredible attitudes. And there is a fantastic book. If you haven't read it already, I highly recommend you go and check it out. It's called Legacy by a chap called James Kerr, who actually spent a year with the New Zealand All Black team. And he looked at their style and the way that they increased their opportunities for winning. And some of the things that he writes in the book are absolutely incredible. And they just, for me, sum up what the New Zealand All Black team is all about, which is obviously incredible attitudes towards winning, towards losing, and towards sportsmanship in general. It's about their phenomenal record. You know, the fact that they do have a huge winning streak. You know, they are hugely successful and they are great, gracious winners. It's because they have incredible leadership skills. Every single member of that team is a leader, but they are leaders who come together as part of a community. Basically, there are just a whole host of reasons I love the New Zealand All Black team. But of course, one of the main reasons, and I think this is probably true for everyone who's ever watched The Hacker, is the hacker itself. It's just unbelievable. Okay, it's different. It is aggressive. It's fun. It's meaningful, it's interesting. There are just lots and lots of reasons that The Hacker is something that has attracted the attention of millions of people worldwide since the New Zealand All Blacks team put it out into the general public and into a form of dance, of ritual that actually everyone can relate to, can appreciate, and can understand. And I just think that's phenomenal. But of course, we're not here to just wax lyrical about how great the rugby team is or how great the hacker is. We're actually here to look at why the hacker is so important in sales. Okay, now, obviously, we're not talking about the actual hacker. I am not suggesting, although hilarious, hilarious as that would be, I'm not suggesting that everyone gets down in their living room before a sales call and just kind of starts the hacker. And I was going to actually start doing the hacker myself then as a little bit of an intro or an example, but realized that A, you can't see me, so you wouldn't be able to appreciate the full glory of it. And B, I don't actually know the hacker that well. And so it would just be a series of random noises, which could be misconstrued as fairly offensive, even though I really love it. So we'll sack that example off. But imagine I was doing it anyway, because that'll just put a smile on your face. So why is the hacker so important to selling? Okay, this is the real meat and potatoes of the podcast. The hacker itself was originally developed, if you like, by Maori tribesmen, and it had two purposes. One was the fact that when they went into battle, they could have this incredible ancestral war cry, which was designed to absolutely terrify their opponents, right? The facial expressions of the hacker are aggressive. They have these bulging eyes, they wiggle their tongues, they grunt, they kind of make these screeching noises, they beat their chests. They would have obviously at that point had weapons and things like that. So it was scary, right? There's this huge amount of men running towards you and kind of doing this chanting, ritualistic, beating of chests moment. There is nothing more masculine, more terrifying than that, okay? If you're going to war, obviously. If you're playing rugby, I'd imagine it's still pretty menacing, but ultimately it's not going to make you wet yourself immediately. But the second reason, and this is where we look at the sales aspect of the hacker, is slightly more important, okay? It's actually about helping their own self-belief. Okay. Now, one of the main purposes of the hacker was for them to boost their own confidence, to give themselves courage. The fact that they were going into war, they were going into a scenario where ultimately they could potentially not walk away, meant that last moment, that moment where they had to really get their energy reserves up, where they really had to believe in themselves, have absolute confidence that they could do the job. Okay, it wasn't the sort of thing where you're going to war, you're looking at the opposite people in the battlefield, and you're kind of like, nah, maybe I'll just check Facebook and like rock up in a minute and it'll all be fine. Like it was scary, it was brutal, it was face to face. And so actually they needed a ritual. They needed a plan, they needed a strategy that would help them not only scare the opposition and make the opposition aware of what was about to happen and what was about to be unleashed on them, but also they needed to have this moment of self-confidence, self-belief that actually they were going to get through to the other side, that they were going to be okay, and that they were going to get the job done. And that's obviously something that the All Blacks have really taken through in their rugby. You know, the hacker is the moment on the pitch where they set themselves up for success. And that is how it relates to sales. Because sales is not about the sales call. And most people will teach you this. They'll be like, oh yeah, your sales page is the most important thing you'll ever write. Oh yeah, the sales call is where all the money is made. That's bull. Okay, anyone who tells you that does not understand relationship-based selling and never will. Because the sale happens way earlier than when someone gets to that sales call with you. It happens way earlier than whenever they click on that sales page. And the point is that you always need to be setting yourself up for sales success. Now, most people, if you walk into an office, and coming from corporate, I did and have experienced many of these, but most corporate companies will train salespeople to have a sales style that works for them. And most salespeople, as a result, will have quirks that they have learned. They're learned behaviors. So they won't all necessarily be the same rituals, but there'll be variations of what they've learned from leaders, from successful salespeople in the past. So, you know, in the offices where I worked, we would we'd have different techniques for people depending on what they were struggling with. So, for example, if somebody was really underconfident on sales calls, we'd make them stand. Okay, we'd be like, stand up at your desk and pace when you're on the phone to your prospective client, because actually when you're standing, your chest is naturally puffed out, you're taking in more breath, you sound more confident, and you are in what's called a power pose. So you are automatically making yourself feel more confident, you're putting yourself in a position of power, and that reflects on the call. So you'll find that some salespeople, they like to walk around, they like to pace their environment, they'll have a wireless headset because of that. We also used to get people to stand on desks. This one is probably not as popular, but it made people who were worried about other people watching them or judging themselves, it put them in an environment where it made it so that everyone for the first 5 minutes did kind of look at you and be like, oh, look, look who's on the desk today. But they weren't judging you. And so actually for people who were nervous about outward criticism, or who were nervous that everyone was watching them, they had this kind of feeling of all eyes being on them. Yes, it was nerve-wracking. And yes, it probably wasn't the simplest way to make that person feel at home in the environment, but it worked. After that first 5 minutes of initially being embarrassed and a bit shocked and kind of, oh God, people are looking at me, they realized that nobody else cared. Because while they were stood on a desk doing a phone call, was hammering the phones just the same, and it didn't make any difference. Okay, nobody was thinking any differently of them. So you'll see those kinds of things. You'll see the standing on the phone, standing on the desk. You'll see the lucky charms around the office. We all have these kinds of rituals, or we all have these symbols that make us feel comfortable, that make us feel like the day is going to be a good one, like we're going to be successful on the call. And that is how the hacker works for the All Blacks. It's how certain rituals work for Formula One drivers. It's why every sports person, particularly boxers, have a visualization process that they will go through before a match, because they need to be setting themselves up consistently to succeed. And it's very, very similar with sales. So what I want to talk about today are the kinds of things that you can be doing to consistently set yourself up for success with your sales, whether it's sales calls, whether it's about going out and being more visible, whether it's, the sales page itself. It's about that, I want to say magic, but that sounds kind of fluffy and a bit, doesn't it? But it's about that thing, that ritual, that process, that strategy that you have, that you do, that is automatically going to set you up for success that day, every day, for selling with confidence, for selling with integrity. So for me, I'm somebody who has, has done the same things, right? Back when I was in corporate, one of the biggest pieces of advice that I used to get from my boss was, if you can't sell to yourself, you can't sell to anyone else. And what he meant by that, and this is a wise guy, he'd been in sales for 30 years and still is, still in the sales world. And he meant that if you couldn't look yourself in the mirror every day and you couldn't tell yourself what your prices were, or in the corporate world, your margins or markups were, then you wouldn't be able to tell anyone else those things. So every day when I wake up, after I've brushed my teeth, usually, I will look in the mirror, even now, and this is with, a decade of experience in the sales world, and I will say to myself, hi, I'm Jess, and these are my prices, and I'll list them out, and I'll do it 3 times. And I know that perhaps if you're thinking, oh, is this bordering on the line of trying to participate in some gratitude ritual or a manifestation thing, it's not that. This is genuinely a very practical sales skill that people teach because it works. Because ultimately you have to be okay with your pricing. You have to be confident in telling other people your pricing, and you have to be confident saying it. And the person who is most critical of you is you. It's not anyone else. Nobody else judges you. It's really only you. So every morning I get up, and 3 times after I brush my teeth, I'm like, hi, I'm Jess, and these are my prices. And I talk about what my prices are. And if I'm launching a specific program, or if I'm having a launch of my membership site or anything like that, I'm like, hi, I'm Jess. These are my prices. And this is how many clients I'm going to enroll this week. And it just sets me up every morning, because I know okay, if I want to enroll 5 clients this week, I need to be making sure that I'm getting 1 client a day on board into my program, into my services. Okay, so it's really important that you're setting yourself up in that way to be successful. And then the second thing that I do, because every day I wake up and I'm like, okay, cool, what am I going to do today? How am I going to make this a successful sales day? I make sure that if it's going to be a day where I specifically focus on sales or sales calls, that I book all of those on the same day. Now, again, there's a specific reason for this. One is scientific. Your brain can only do so much at one time. It's called context switching, and Todd Herman actually explains it much better than I do. But basically, your brain finds it really difficult to flip between 2 or more tasks at a time. So despite everybody thinking that women are super geniuses who can multitask, and indeed, let's not disappoint, we kind of are superheroes, our brains actually can't focus on more than one thing at once, because otherwise what happens is we deplete the power that our brain is actually putting to that second or third task. So it's called context switching. Look it up. It's really, really interesting. And it's really relevant to sales because it also explains why customers don't like having lots and lots of choices when it comes to buying. They like you to give them the right option for them, because obviously if you're putting 2 or more things in front of them, their brain is trying to context switch. They're like, whoa, I can't cope with this. So, that's a brief overview, but definitely check out context switching, because having all your sales calls on the same day means that your brain isn't having to do lots and lots of work. If you are having a day where you want to set yourself up for sales success, book all of your sales calls. What it means is that you're actually prepared for each call. Your brain isn't switching between what you would normally be doing, so in my case, coaching, and then trying to sell. The 2 activities are very different, and therefore you act differently in those situations. And so if I was trying to run a sales call like a coaching call, it would be very, very unlikely that I would get the sale. Okay, very, very unlikely, because as we talked about in episode 1, sales calls are not free coaching calls. They're not where you give a ton of free information and overwhelm the client. They're about helping that prospective buyer make an empowered decision about whether they want to work with you or not. Okay, so if we have them all on the same day, it means that our brain is primed to have that sales conversation all of the time. It means that our brain is in the right frame of mind and the right place to be thinking, okay, I need to set the agenda now. Okay, I need to go through the discovery phase now. Okay, I need to handle objections now. Okay, I need to sell now. Your brain is in that routine, and it makes it a lot easier. Now, when something is a lot easier, when our sales call is a lot easier, what happens is we become more confident, right? Naturally, we are more confident because we know what we're doing. It's kind of like driving. Everybody said this to me when I first started driving. I found it really difficult. I was terrible. It took me a long time to pass my test. And it wasn't because I was bad at driving per se. It was because I found that I always had to be thinking. I was like, oh God, I have to move the gear into first and then into second. And then, oh God, now I have to try not to stall the car, and I have to steer the wheel, and I have to try and avoid all the other traffic on the road. And it was tough. And people kept saying to me, you don't even think about it anymore. Second nature. It's like riding a bike, like walking or breathing. And I remember thinking, those people are either genius drivers or, absolute Muppets. I don't know why they're on the road. It's terrifying to me because I couldn't imagine a time where driving would be easy, where it would be second nature. Now, in all honesty, I can get up in the middle of the night and pick up friends from the airport, even when I'm tired. I've had a coffee to make sure that I'm awake and that I'm going to be safe driving, but it is like second nature. I can have music on in the car. I can put the windows down. I can even, think about podcasts that I'm listening to on the way and things, and I'm still a safe driver. It's the same thing when you put your sales call all in one day, because your brain flips into auto mode and it does the hard work for you. And it means that you just focus on the important stuff, which ultimately is listening to the prospective buyer, listening to their needs and matching them with a solution that's right for them. Okay. So that's the second thing that I look for when I'm looking to have the most successful day and I'm setting myself up for success. I'm putting all my sales calls in the one day or the 2 days to make sure that I'm really in the right frame of mind, that I'm delivering the best experience somebody could have on a sales call. Okay. Now, the third thing I do, again, setting yourself up for success in sales is not about winging it. I know a lot of people think this. They're like, oh God, have you ever heard that phrase where people go, salespeople are such bullshitters. They're so good at just improvising. Not true, guys. Busting the myth. Some of us are, some of us are not. I personally am not one of those people. I like structure. And for me, sales is a learned skill. It wasn't something I was always good at. So I found that for me, it was much more natural to develop a structure that I knew for my sales calls that would work so that I could actually set myself up for success. And so that I wasn't always on the fly or the back foot hoping that I was going to get it right. I knew that I was giving myself a structure that would actually work and would guarantee me on the worst hungover days at the office. I knew I was setting myself up for a really good call and for a good client experience. I would also like to point out right now that I was not drunk at the corporate office all of the time. It was one of those things where the Thursdays were a big night out in London, and sometimes on a Friday morning, I was a little less chirpy, should I say, than perhaps I wanted to be. But nevertheless, sales call structure is really important. Not winging it is super important for guaranteeing yourself the best opportunities and the best chances of being successful at closing that client with ease. Okay. So if you haven't figured out a sales call structure that's working for you right now, and by working for you right now, I mean closing at a rate of 50% or higher, then go back, listen to episode number 1, which is all about never hearing another no on a sales call, and use that structure. Seriously, other people are using it right now. They're taking action on it and they're landing clients. It's a really, really good structure, and it's the only one that I use in my business. It's the only one I teach my clients, and it's something that I've developed over 10 years of being in sales. It works. Okay, so having that sales call structure is super important. It makes it much easier for you to be successful. It guarantees you the best opportunity for success, and also it makes you feel really confident. And that's a huge part when it comes to successful in sales. Confidence is everything. Confidence in yourself that actually you can do this, you can deliver to the client, you can say your prices without whinging, or I just said whinging and I meant wincing. Obviously, this is a late afternoon recording. And then it's also about confidence for the buyer. When they understand and when they see that you really are confident in sales call, you're confident in your pricing, you're confident in what you're going to be delivering, it makes them feel safe. It makes them feel really good about buying. It makes them feel really confident in you. And that ultimately leads to a good outcome, because ultimately we buy from people that we know, we like, and we trust. So the final thing that I do in my little sales call recipe for success is I practice objection handling. I would like to say regularly, but I think it's more like obsessively. Not gonna lie, I'm a little bit nerdy about objections. And honestly, there are only 12 objections that you're ever gonna get anyway. That was statistically proven by Harvard Business Review. They are much smarter than I am. And again, you can go and check that out, because they did this study that was really, really interesting about the reasons that people don't buy. And they came up with this idea that actually there were only really 12 real objections that anyone would throw at you, and that every other objection is just a variation of one of those 12, or actually leads back to them. So that's a really, really interesting resource. And if you want to know what those 12 objections are, you can obviously go and check them out and get practicing like I do. Now, objection handling is tough, because obviously what we don't want to do is just have a smart answer, because objection handling, it's personal for the buyer. You always need to be empathetic when it comes to handling their objection, because a lot of the time objections aren't no's. They're either not yet, or I've not been reassured enough to buy at the moment. So you've got to be thinking about objections as really questions or wanting more information. And so for that reason, when you're looking at objection handling, obviously make sure that you know what you're going to say or what kind of frame of mind you're going to be in that day. If somebody comes to you and says, I don't have the money, I need to go away and talk to my partner, I need to think about it for 12 hours, or whatever the objection looks like. But you also need to be practicing them regularly so that when you're hearing them, your brain isn't going into defensive mode and thinking, no, they just hate me. They never want to buy from me ever again. How can I get off the phone as quickly as possible and make this really, really awkward and uncomfortable for us both so that person never comes back? Okay, we probably don't think the last part, but actually when you handle objections badly, that's what you do. You give the prospective buyer a kind of crap experience and they don't come back. They don't want to because now they associate you either with hard, pushy salesperson, and that's never a good look, or worse, they think that you don't care. Because if you don't handle an objection correctly, if you don't handle it properly, it can make people feel like you don't really want them to work with you. So you really have got to practice these. This is something you should be doing daily. Now, if you have a spouse or another person living with you, flatmate, brother, somebody that ultimately is going to do the job, they're going to throw objections at you, but also they're probably going to take the mickey a little bit because that always makes it more fun. Then please practice these. Get them every so often. I do this with my friends and family. Every Sunday I sit down, I'm like, hey, throw an objection at me. And, people will ask me about what I would say if they told me they didn't have the money, or if they told me that they weren't ready to be coached yet. And I still find it really, really useful. I still find it really valuable. And also it's good fun. And it can really, really help you in other situations. When you go to an electrical store and they offer you warranties or extra insurance policies that you don't really need, but you kind of feel like you should have to buy. Objection handling regularly and practicing it regularly will give you like 10 objections that other salespeople who aren't great will not be able to handle. So you can just walk away with your new Hoover in peace. Not that I've done that recently at all. So that is the point behind ritual. It's the point behind setting yourself up for success. And it's the point behind actually having something or some things that you do, a process that you complete that is going to set yourself up well for selling successfully. Okay, so whatever happens, these are things that you should be doing daily. You should be making sure that you have the ability or the time in the morning to set yourself up and say, okay, these are my prices. I'm confident in my pricing. I'm happy with what I'm going to be going out and selling today. And these are the amount of clients I'm going to be enrolling this week or today specifically, because that will give you confidence. It will raise your pride in yourself, and it will raise you out there and tell people, hey, I'm going to enroll 5 clients this week. This is going to happen. This is a done deal. Stay publicly accountable. When we tell ourselves these things, when we're genuinely confident in our abilities, they happen, okay? And then obviously we need to set ourselves up for success in terms of the practical things like the sales calls, things like booking them all on one day, making sure your brain doesn't have to work as hard, you don't have to context switch, and that you are in the right frame of mind that day to make money, to help your buyer come to an empowered decision, to actually hold that space for them to do that, rather than trying to half coach them, half sell to them, and it becomes very awkward and confusing. And obviously you need to have that structure as well. Setting yourself up on the call directly for success, having the agenda, having the discovery phase, knowing when to handle objections, knowing when to pitch, knowing what to say in the event of any of those kind of 12 objections. And that's the final piece. Objection handling with empathy, practicing it regularly, even though it's uncomfortable, because honestly, the only way that you are going to get better is to practice, is to do it regularly, is to push yourself out of your comfort zone and do different things. Because honestly, sales really is learned behaviors. It's a learned skill. It's not something, nobody jumps out of the womb and is like, oh my goodness, I really want to sell houses or cars. Nobody does that. Okay, I promise you. And if anyone has a child that is doing that, please send them my way. I will totally coach them for free because I think that would be epic. Okay. But that is what you need to be looking at on a regular basis. You need to be setting yourself up to success. I know a lot of people do this around mindset specifically. I see that a lot of people are journaling, a lot of people are writing gratitude journals and vision boards and all that kind of stuff. But sales is no different. You know, it's no different from the All Blacks and their hacker and the way that sets themselves up for success game. It's no different from the boxer who visualizes the end of the match and himself winning and having his hand put up by the umpire. It's no different from any of the athletes who visualize themselves winning at the end of the race, who practice it step by step. It's no different. It's about having a routine, a process, or a strategy that is designed to put you, your mind, and your actions all in the right place to make sure that you sell with confidence, ease, and integrity. All right. So there you go. If you have enjoyed today's episode, if you're thinking, actually, Jess, I have a little sales routine I'd like to share, please do. I want to hear about any lucky charms, anything that you do, I used to have a little elephant that a client of mine brought back from Thailand, where elephants are very, very lucky. And they brought back this little lucky elephant. Even now, I have it on my desk. I call him Joe. He's my lucky elephant. He's my lucky sales elephant. And every day when I have like a moment, I'm like, and I just pat Joe's head. This makes me sound really weird, doesn't it? But, keep listening. New episode is coming out on Friday. And if you have enjoyed this episode, if you do have any feedback, please obviously hit that subscribe button. Make sure you don't miss out on any of the juicy goodness that's coming from the other episodes. And leave a review. Let me know how we're doing. And obviously, if you do have any of those lucky charms, hit me up with an email, jessica@jessicalorimer.com. I'm always around to hear about any fun rituals, fun sales processes, or lucky charms that you have that make it all easier for you. I'll see you in the next episode.